Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will get started here momentarily. Can everyone hear me? If I could get a couple hand raises, that'd be great. Cool. Thanks. All right. So this is one of our virtual disaster instructor tech talks. This one focuses on Microsoft Teams overview, just kind of giving you a zoomed out view of teams with respect to how they are it or how they how it is typically used when delivering virtual classes within disaster cycle services. So certainly the audience is virtual disaster cycle services instructors, but instructors in all areas or anyone else is certainly welcome. So we do record these sessions. We do and post them to a page on OneSource with links to their, I think it's some YouTube channel they get posted to. We'll share that towards the end of the presentation. Unless you're actively asking a question, please keep your mic muted and or in your camera off unless you've got something you're asking or participating in the meeting now. If you got any questions, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we can facilitate them that way. And we also try to keep an eye on the chat window with questions there. It's usually some other members of the team there might grab some of those questions as we're progressing on with the presentation. But my name is Charlie Matthew. I should turn my camera on here. Oh, it was on. Doesn't want to turn on. Why is my camera not working? This is fun. Must be because I've got too many screens open or something. Anyway, well, my name is Charlie Matthew. I'm one of the members of the Tech Talk team, and I typically teach a review course. And we got some other members there from across the country that have helped develop this course here. I think we've been doing this at least 5 years. I think this was we are entering our 6th year of these, which seems like time flies. So the purpose of this course is to provide some disaster instructors with information around Microsoft Teams and just some of the ins and outs of that and how it's used in courses. We're not going to get into any specifics on specific course questions. We're just kind of focusing on the tool of Teams. Oh, hang on here. Don't touch your docking station when you're presenting a movie. So moving on. You still see the presentation, right? If I get a couple hand. Oh, that went away. Let me step back here. Wow. Okay. Teams is being great today. Okay, my camera's being ornery. So we do these sessions monthly on the fourth Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern on a rotation of topics. And what we're going over today is just an overview of Teams, but we do have some focus sessions that dive into the specific topics like sharing content, breakout rooms, and on from there. and we'll touch on the full schedule as we show you some additional resources at the end of the presentation. So we are on OneSource. Just go to OneSource and in the search area, just type in Virtual Disaster Instructor Tech Talks, and then, or VDITT, and you'll see that come up. Go ahead and click on that, and you'll bring up our page, which has all of the links and such for our upcoming meetings. Just to show you here what that. This is what the current page looks like. So there'll be links here. We'll get this refreshed here with the current schedule. But in February it's the 26th, I believe. I've got it on the ending slide, but then there's links to slide decks and such here used in our presentation up there on OneSource, and we keep that updated. So Microsoft Teams, obviously it's used for lots of different things: chatting, phone calls, collaboration within a group of people working on a project. As far as using the meeting tool within Teams is what's used for facilitating virtual courses within DCF. So there's different clients or ways that you can use Microsoft Teams. The primary one that we want you to use is the desktop version. As an instructor or someone leading a meeting, you're going to have a better experience and access to all of the various tools and options if you use the desktop version of Teams. If you're using a Red Cross laptop, it's already installed. If you have a personal laptop and you have Windows, it likely is already installed, especially if you have Windows 11. But if you, for some reason, you don't, you can just go to the Microsoft site and download it there. Also, if you are using Mac, they do offer a Mac OS version for Mac laptops. Just understand that it's pretty much the same. There are a few little differences on that. You can also use Teams in a browser window, and generally speaking, you should be using the 3 latest versions of the browser in order to use the browser iteration of Teams. And then there are certainly mobile apps that you can use Teams with to attend a meeting. You can technically present from a smartphone or a tablet. I would not recommend that for a course, but you can actually do it. But as instructors, we want you to focus on the desktop version. Again, instructors use desktop, and we already just talked about where you can get that, download it if needed. You're going to have access to all the tools and such for the course here. Let me make sure I've got. It does, because it does. A couple notes on Mac OS. You need to be using the three most recent versions of Mac OS, whatever that is, whatever the 3 most recent versions are at the time. You need to be using one of those in order to use the desktop version that they make for Mac OS. You can certainly do the browser stuff, but if you're presenting, we prefer that you use the desktop version. So as far as setting up a meeting in Teams, how that gets facilitated within your region will differ slightly. Sometimes they will create all of the DCS courses being taught online locally will be, created through a central account, or you might be assigned to create it. But essentially, it's just creating a meeting in Teams. Some of the options of that meeting might get adjusted as far as who is a presenter and who are just attendees, especially on larger meetings. And then that meeting gets created, and then the link for that meeting is then shared out in some manner out to the registered participants of the course. And that can happen different ways in your region. So certainly if it's a course that's been on the regional schedule or whatnot, please make sure you're interfacing with your local team on that. But the key thing is that the Red Cross account that creates the meeting is the main organizer of that meeting, and they kind of have ultimate control of some of the settings and things. We do have what's called the co-organizer or additional organizer role that can be added, and certainly an instructor, if your account wasn't the one that created the meeting as the main organizer role, you should make sure that you get assigned as at least a co-organizer role for that meeting, which will then allow you to adjust some of the options, some of the controls that most other participants of the meeting won't have access to. The key thing. We do have a full separate presentation that gets into creating meetings and little idiosyncrasies of all that. So watch for that on the schedule, and you can certainly see the links for past courses and the slide deck. So regardless of how the course gets created in Teams, once we get to the point where you need to start your class, you will start the class by basically starting the meeting. And you will do that either from your calendar invite. Down there in the body of that calendar invite, there'll be some text and there'll be that link there to, click here to join the meeting. Because it's a hyperlink, your web browser will open, but because you're an awesome instructor, you have the desktop version installed, and you should get some sort of notification at the top of your screen that says, hey, you have the desktop application open. Do you want to open that? And you should just, click on open or yes or whatever the box says there. For some reason, this doesn't come up. Just click the option to open your Teams app, because we want you to be using the desktop version of it as an instructor. You should be starting the course, or rather, you should be starting the meeting in Teams at least 15 minutes before the course, unless the instructor manual states differently. Some courses may have you starting that sooner before the time there. The key thing is that that 15 minutes, at least 15 minutes, is there for everyone to kind of get settled in, make sure everything's working, so you don't have mishaps and things. And it's also a good time for people to ask little side questions before the course gets started. And understand that participants who might just be joining from the hyperlink and don't have a charlie.matthew@redcross.org account, they've signed up to it and they've got email that went to their personal email through Volunteer Connection, and here's my link to join the course. Those participants can't actually join the meeting until you have started it. So that's also partly why we want you to get it started at least 15 minutes before, so that when they click on it, it doesn't say like, hey, this meeting hasn't started yet. Causes a little confusion. So you would either click the hyperlink in the body of your email. You can also, within Teams itself, in the broader view of the Teams application, on the calendar tab, you can find the meeting that you have there, click on it, and then click on the join button. That's another way that you can start the meeting or join that meeting. But regardless of which path you choose, once you join the meeting, the first thing that's going to come up is a window, a little preview window for you to kind of check out your camera shot and your microphone and things there. So here we see our Taffy Cat ambassador checking out camera feed, and Taffy Cat has selected and downloaded a Red Cross background. Those are on OneSource somewhere if you're into those. And then pressing the gear or the sliders will get you additional options where you can make sure that you're using the right speaker and mic. If you're using a headset, maybe you've got different things plugged into your computer. Make sure you've got want to use for the meeting selected. If you have more than one camera, on from there. It's a way to kind of check it out before you join the meeting. But once you've got that all squared away, you would just click the join now, and then you'd get brought into the meeting and on from there. So let's me do double check here, chat people. Where's your act view? Okay. I haven't added any new ones, just checking. So at the top of your screen of that window that is for the meeting, there'll be a collection of icons on what is referred to as the meeting toolbar. This may change every now and then as Microsoft rearranges where stuff is or adds a feature or something there. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. But just from left to right, just a quick thing here. We got our little key down here on the bottom. So the cartoon call out there, that's the meeting chat. The one that looks like a person, and then there'll be a number next to that. That's the people or the attendance list. And there's some additional options we'll get into in a second. Raise your hand is its own button. The smiley face gets into reactions where you can have, smiley faces and hand clapping and other things that allow people to give feedback in meetings. View, that is where you can adjust your view of the meeting and kind of where some things are. Is the camera shots on the right or is at the top? A whole selection of options there. Notes, it's not really something probably used for courses and things, more so like meetings and things. We don't really get into that. As a organizer or co-organizer, you should see this rooms button here is how the breakout rooms are controlled. And then there's additional apps and things that we can get into, which are somewhat covered in some of the other sessions that we offer. And then anytime you see the three buttons, the three dots and the more, basically that's an additional sub-menu of things. And you'll find that in a lot of places within Teams as well as other Microsoft products. Camera is just off and on there. Same thing with the mic. If there's no X through it, or a slash through it rather, then it's on. If there's a slash through it, that means it's off. And the all-important share button here is the square with the up arrow, means that is to share content, meaning that you can either share a screen, which is what I'm doing right now, or there's ways that you directly share the PowerPoint presentation and a couple other options. And then the leave button is how you can leave the meeting or end the meeting. We'll get into touch on that a little bit later. So the device settings, it's important to point out that there is a little drop-down arrow on the right side of those icons where you can see what the current options are for those. So let me slide over my window here, kind of show you what that looks like. Point that out specifically here. So up in here, click on that. You will see some additional options here. You'll see a camera preview, and I'm not sure why this camera's not working, but I'll deal with that later. You can have different backgrounds, and if the content of this window doesn't fit in here, you might see a slider. You can slide and see different things. And then the mic also has a drop down there where you have controls of what device is going to be your speaker and what device is going to be our microphone, and kind of see our audio level here. And then there's some additional audio settings here that you can get into down here. Those are some key things to understand how they work with the off and on, and being able to select what device you're using is important. And where we see that, again, see that three dots is where we're going to see a sub-menu of things. And this changes up a lot. Microsoft likes to rearrange things and where stuff is here. Some things to focus on. There's meeting options. respect to roles of attendees and things that you can get into. We'll touch on that in a second. Other ones that we focus on are the live captioning, as well as the recording buttons and things. So currently, if you click on the three buttons here, three dots, you see we've got a whole sub-menu of things here where I can stop and start the recording. I can see what the meeting info is. That's just a quick way to get to copy the join info if you needed to send that to someone real quick. Language and speech, that's where we can get into live captions. Now again, you're seeing my view of the meeting. So if I turn live captions on, it does a very good job of captioning it for you, just your experience in the meeting. And if you want to get into the weeds here, there's actually some language settings here. So you could have, say, if you had someone that spoke Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish at least fluently, I could set it to where while that person's speaking to that language, and we can actually have teams translating that as you're talking back and forth. There's a little side note there, so there's some additional option and styles that you can get into. But the captioning from an accessibility standpoint is great for those who might be not able to hear well for whatever reason. Just gives some clarity. I wear hearing aids, so I often in meetings will have the captioning turn on. It just allows me to make sure I'm hearing what I'm hearing as we go through the meeting there. And again, it's just for your individual view of that meeting. That's where that is. And it's important to know where that is so you can explain that to a participant how to get to that, if that is a tool that they wanted to utilize. And there's some other settings down here, notifications and whatnot. With respect to the view, we'll come back to that. Forget we've changed some things around here. So the view button, the one that looks like four squares, or rather that's more than four squares, but I digress. It's just, you have some controls as far as what's your view of the meeting and where stuff is. And a key thing that is within this menu is something called turn off incoming video. This can be helpful for participants who might have not a real fast internet connection where everything's getting kind of jumbled. And you will find that it's helpful in that situation for that specific person, not necessarily everyone in the meeting, is for they can go under view and select the option here called turn off incoming video. And what that does is it stops all of those video feeds being sent to their session, the meeting, and really cuts down on the amount of bandwidth needed for their experience of the meeting, as well as turning off their own camera can be helpful too. That's a key one under view, under more options is the turn off incoming video, understanding where that is so you can explain to somebody where that is if that's something that you might have them try. Additionally, you can adjust where the gallery is with respect to the preview videos, and if it's at the top and it's on the bottom, what size they are, all sorts of things that you can play around with. But that's a key thing there is that turn off incoming video. Now the participant list, the people icon, lots of controls on this for a presenter. The participant list will be typically split. Either everyone is a presenter, which is generally the default for most meetings, unless it's a really large one, and there's been some segregation of that. But as far as the different roles and to understand them, the organizer is the account that created the meeting. Co-organizers are just people that have been elevated to that role, and they have access to some of the additional meeting controls. A presenter is anyone that can share content And again, by default, everyone is a presenter unless you've changed their role in the setup or during the meeting. And then the role of attendee is limited options where they can just speak and share video, but they're not able to share content. Key thing here is that on large courses where there's a lot of people in attendance, it is helpful to limit the number of presenters so you don't have everyone doesn't have access to that share button and inadvertently sharing something that doesn't need to be shared, or they accidentally click on the wrong thing. So how that looks in our so we look on the people here. The number that's to the right of the icon is an indication of how many people are currently in the meeting. If some of you were to raise your hand, go ahead and raise your hand right now. You'll notice that there we go. Now this number changes here. There's a number that's in red. That's saying that there's 4 people that have their hand raised. So if I didn't have the participant list here, I would at least see that, hey, there's 3 people with their hand raised if I had this window open. Additionally, over here on the right, you'll see that it puts numbers next to the people's names who've raised their hand as kind of like a queue in the order that you would facilitate their questions or whatnot. And then you have other options here where you can, if somebody were to unmute their mic and then step away to get something, and then we were hearing their dog bark all the time, any presenter can go in and mute them. But if that person wants to talk again, they will need to unmute themselves. There is also, if some of you were to unmute your mic.
My mic is unmuted.
Great.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So if I'm presenting and there's some other people that have their mic open, a quick way to mute everyone is for me to click this mute all button. It's going to ask me to confirm that, and it's going to mute everyone except me. That's a helpful step to do at the start of a course, just to kind of get everyone to, quiet up to get things started. People can still unmute after that if they need to ask a question, but that is a helpful button that you'll find. And then there's certainly other buttons here. So I got Dan here. So if I wanted, so right now everyone is a presenter, so there is actually no differentiation between the different roles here. But if we were to pretend here that Diane was just an attendee, I could just go over here to the 3 dots and I can make that person now an attendee. It'll ask me to confirm that. And now you'll see that Diane is just an attendee, and all she can do is turn her camera on and unmute. She can't share content. So if there's a situation where most of the participants were attendees, and then one of them wanted to share some content, or we forgot to make one of the presenters a presenter role, we can just find them in the list here. Oh, yeah, Dan, let's make you a presenter. So we just find their name, do the 3 dots, and click on Make Presenter, and it just takes a moment. Now Dan's the presenter again. So this is where we can, the participant list is where you control muting all, and changing roles of meeting participants. Is what I just explained. This is what this slide went into that. But again, anywhere you've got the 3 dots there on the participant list next to people's names where you have different options and things, to where you get into those options that we went through. All parts of the participant list controls. Additionally, there is the chat window. I see some people have been pretty quiet. That's okay. Chat window there where people can just ask, quick questions. It's a good place for that, or pasted links. You can attach files, but understand that only people who are logged into their Red Cross account for whatever they're using to join that meeting and course in Teams whatever account they're logged into, it has to be a Red Cross account in order for them to grab the file. If they've joined just through the link and they're not logged into a Red Cross account, they won't have access to the file that you've posted to the chat. They will have access to any hyperlinks and things, so just be aware of that, that if you do post a file to the chat, only people who are logged into their Red Cross account can access it. And then we've got our raise hand and reactions. So already kind of been doing that there. So if everyone to raise their hand right now, it's just clicking the raise your hand button there at the top. So I raise my hand. I can see indicates who has their hands raised. And then the number next to that is this indication of who is first to raise their hand and whatnot. And then if you click on raise, you can put it down there. On the participant lists, next to somebody, you can, as a presenter, lower someone's hand if they forgot to raise their hand. So that's what that is there. There is also the reactions. Kind of a cool thing there. So everyone put their hands down, and if we click on the react button, we've got a couple different, hey, we can say thumbs up, or I can clap my hands, and then those will either clap in front of my picture, or if I was like presenting a slide deck, you would kind of see them like rise up from below that. It's a way to have some interaction with your meeting participants to make sure that you're alive and they're actually paying attention. And then we get into sharing content. There's a couple ways to do that. The main way is going to be either screen sharing, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm sharing my screen because I'm flipping back and forth between a slide deck and an application. So that's generally a good route to take for that, so you don't have to stop sharing, unshare, and change the way that you're sharing all the time. Good route for that. You can also include the computer sound if you're sharing your screen. We'll try that here in a second. And then we also have this thing called PowerPoint Live, which is where if it's the actual full slide deck is shared up to the participants, where the participants will see the slide deck, but you as the instructor will actually see the instructor view, so you can see the instructor notes and all of that, which can be helpful for courses that have a lot of notes in there, as well as some other things, and we'll see some examples of that. You can also share a specific window on your screen, which is fine if that's the only thing you want to share. But what tends to happen is people forget that they just shared a specific window. But we'll come back to that. So screen sharing, sharing content, screen sharing. So the way that you would initiate that is in the upper right-hand corner. You would click the square with the up arrow, and then it's going to give you this submenu that's going to come up here. And you'll notice that there's a scroll bar here. And it's broken into several different sections. We're going to focus here, in this case, in the screen section, because we're going to be sharing our screen. And if you have more than one screen, so like I have a dual monitor set up, I want to make sure that I'm selecting the right screen that has the stuff that I want to share with everyone. So you have a selection here of which monitor you want to show. Additionally, there is a slider bar up here, and if you turn that on, so like left to right, so that if you move it to the right, so now it's purple, that indicates on. So now it's going to share any of the computer audio. So any audio that would normally be coming out of my computer speakers or in my headset is also going to be shared with everyone in meeting. So that's helpful if there is a slide deck or a video link that you need to play as part of the course. It's important that you have to do that through screen content sharing. There is some additional recent updates with the PowerPoint Live that we'll touch on also. But generally, this is the better route to go with that. You need some audio to play. just keep in mind that with your sharing your screen, it shares everything on the screen that you selected. So don't have like Outlook open that it has some, an unpleasant email from someone that everyone does not need to see up on your screen when you share your screen. Just remember, it shares everything on your screen. Now, as other presenters, what you might have noticed is that you have a little window there at the top of the screen where you could request control um, or something along that lines. And that allows you to kind of hand off presenting without having to change who's presenting. So someone else can actually take over my mouse control, move it around as if they were sitting at my computer. And then there's some other ways to do some picture-in-picture stuff. If you plan on using that for a class, I would try that out first. But there's lots of other things that you can do, but those are just kind of the main points. The other way that we share content is through PowerPoint live sharing. So it shares the PowerPoint slide deck. Again, the participants see the slide, and you're able to do like a pointer and draw on the slides and stuff. But the presenter will see the presenter view and some of the additional controls and what. We'll see some screenshots of that because I can't actually show that to you live. And I heard some rumblings recently about possibly if a slide deck has audio, it does show it now. I haven't actually tried that yet, but someone might speak to that here in a second. But as far as how do you start that? So again, it's through the share button, square button, up arrow. You're going to click that, and if you scroll down, notice our slider here is a little bit farther down, and we get to the what's called the PowerPoint Live section. What you will see is a part of your Red Cross account that you're logged into. You will see the like 5 most recent PowerPoint slides that you have opened. And if for some reason you don't see the one that you need there, then you can do show more and actually browse to it on your computer or to a OneDrive location there. I would recommend that it's helpful if you open up the slide that you're going to use for your course. Just open it up in PowerPoint prior to the class so that it's a recently accessed file. That way it shows up in the quick list here. So, this is what the presenter view looks like. So if I was doing PowerPoint Live, so I see the slide deck. This is the slide that like we would be on right now. I was doing that, but I have access to some additional tools where I can do a pointer. I can actually draw on the slides, highlight, and as far as advance, go back and forth on the slides and on from there. If there were notes that were built into PowerPoint, those would appear here on the right, and you can adjust the text size and everything else. You also have the slider down here in the bottom that shows upcoming slides, so you can kind of see what's coming up so that you can try to avoid talking ahead of yourself, which is something I commonly do in slide decks because I get too excited. And those are all the tools there. And then you've got some additional controls up here with respect to the layout and some other things. The private view button here, if you click that and it puts a slash through, what that does is it prevents everyone else from clicking ahead in the slide deck and forces them to be on the slide that you've selected. So that can be helpful, or however you want to use that. And there's some other buttons here where you can actually see the whole gallery of slides and jump way ahead if you need to, and on from there. But then as a added bonus, you still have access to all the buttons within Teams. So I can click on chat and I can see the chat within the same window. So if people ask questions there, and then I can also click on people and see the participant list, dealing with who has their hand raised and questions, and on from there. And then the participants will just see the slide that you're on. I'll show what that looks like here. So I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share the actual slide deck. Okay, so because it's the first time I'm pulling up this deck for this meeting, it's going to start at the beginning. But had I been using this prior and I had left PowerPoint Live and somebody was sharing something else, or I shared my screen for a while, and then I came back to sharing through PowerPoint Live, it would actually remember what slide you were on. It usually does, most of the time. And then what will happen is you'll have a little message that will pop up here, and it will say, in your view, which you can't see right now, hey, you were last on slide, 47. Do you want to jump to that? And you can click on yes, and then it will jump up to that slide. So in lieu of that, I'm going to take my slide bar, which I know you can't see right now, but it's that slide bar that you saw in the screenshot, and we're going to zoom ahead here to the slide that we're on. So pin focus and spotlight. So my controls here on the bottom, I can do a laser pointer. I can do have a bouncing ball here as I'm, hey, over here, or this thing here, that, or I can kind of do a laser line, which is kind of new. You can also draw on the slide, and there's ways to change the color, or you can highlight something. Hey, it's this, on from there. That's all. That's what you as someone who's not presenting looks at. But if you look at the top, you can see that you can, I think, request control. So if you have more than one presenter and you are sharing the slide deck as through PowerPoint Live, you can actually hand off the presenting, and then each presenter can advance their own slides without having to stop sharing, reshare it, and all that. It's a more smoother experience. So if somebody wants to try clicking on that, at the top of your window, there should be like a request control or something like that. Verbiage of that changes periodically. Anyone see that at the top of the screen?
Take control.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and click on that. So now you can see the presenter view, and then you can advance the slides. So go ahead and advance the slide and then go back. Cool. Understand that when you do advance slides, it does take a moment for everyone else to see that advance change. So I'm going to go ahead and take control back. And I'm not sure why I did that, but it did. And then so it ended up closing the meeting there, that deck there. So that's how we would pull that back up here. So now it's asking me, would you like to resume from slide 31? And I click on resume, and then it jumps up to the slide that we're on. So pin, focus, and spotlight. These are some controls that are available to either affect your view of the meeting or everyone's view of the meeting. So pin is a way for within your personal view of the meeting, you can stick specific participants' video feeds to always be in your view. Like it's like a sticky view, so you'll always see those people as part of the meeting. Can be where that could be helpful. Additionally, there's a feature called Focus, which is under the If you click on view, you'll see focus on content, which is what it's called. What that does is it turns all of the video feeds off and just focuses on the content that's being shared. So depending on your how you want to do the meeting or your view of the meeting, that can be helpful as someone who's watching a presentation. And then something that can affect everyone's view is called spotlight, which forces pinning someone. So instead of just pinning someone individually for your view, it affects everyone's view. So you can make the main presenter always shown, or if there's like a guest speaker for a little bit, you can spotlight them so we make sure that everyone sees them and they're always on the screen. So how does that look? So I'm going to share my screen. That's not the screen. So if a bunch of you could turn your cameras on, kind of helps. My camera is not cooperating for whatever reason. So if we get a few more, that'd be helpful. So again, you're seeing my view of the meeting in the share content box there. But what we can do is we can go over here to Elizabeth. And I'd be like, well, just for my view, I want to see Elizabeth all the time. So I'm going to pin Elizabeth. So now I see Elizabeth in a real big camera shot. Everyone else is a smaller one. And I can add additional people. See, I'll turn your camera off now. So there we go. Let's add. So I want to see Elizabeth Nerley all the time, regardless of who's talking. His Teams on its own will try to put the actively speaking or recently spoken people as those are the camera feeds that you see, and as different people talk in the meeting, that will change. But if you pin certain people, you will always see them in the view, regardless of who's talking or not talking. And again, that's just for your experience of the meeting. And you can add additional people. I think it's up to 8. And if you don't want to see them anymore, you just unpin them. And then the focus content under view is, sorry, not under view. And then I can't do it because I'm sharing content right now, but that's just where you find that is under the view menu, focus on content. It just turns off all the video feeds for your experience of the meeting and just focuses on whatever content is being shared. Now, the spotlight. Okay, so if some of you could turn your cameras back on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. What Spotlight does, so Phyllis has got her camera on, and I want to spotlight Phyllis for everyone. So instead of being a little box on everyone's screen, we make sure that we always see Phyllis in the main view here. This can be used as a tool in different ways, to highlight a speaker, while someone's doing their, guest speaker presentation. Maybe they're not presenting, but we always they're giving a little update on something. So maybe you want to spotlight them. There's different options there. And you can add additional people just like for pinging, just under that spotlighting affects everyone's view of the meeting. And it's usually just if you had presenters and attendees, I think just the presenters can deal with that. Davis, Keith, you've got a question there. You got your hand up.
Yes, and that can only be done when the participant's camera is on, correct? The presenter can't just turn the camera on.
No, you can still pin them even if they have their camera off. You would just see their icon until they turn their camera on.
Okay, all right, that was the question.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
All right, so that's pin, focus, and spotlight. So let's go back to our deck. Ask me jump up to 31 there. That's great. A couple other options is the breakout rooms. We have a whole separate presentation on this, but essentially what the breakout rooms is that it allows you to split up participants of the meeting into individual sub-meetings. So you can put 4 people in this room, 4 people in this room, 4 people in that room. And essentially, once you assign them or automatically assign them, there's different ways to do it. Once you turn the breakout rooms on, it moves everyone to their breakout rooms to have a little, basically a sub-meeting. It looks like they just got moved to a different meeting in Teams. And then when you close the room, they can come back. So that's a way to do breakout sessions for the courses that have that as part of the experience. But generally, for the organizer or co-organizer of the meeting, the process to kind of initiate that is to click on the rooms button. It's going to ask you how many rooms you want. How do you want to assign them, either manually or automatically. It'll just try to split it evenly across the rooms. And then you create the rooms, and then you'll see that in the participant list where who's assigned to which room. And then by clicking their names on the right, you can move people to different rooms and whatnot there. But we have a whole separate presentation that gets into this in a little more detail because it does have a lot of steps to it. If you're going to be teaching a course that has this, that where you need to use this tool, please make sure that you are testing it out with a couple other instructors or some guinea pigs, so you can kind of test out and kind of see how that everything works. And then just some additional notes here that's available for at the end of a class. You can download the attendance list. It will get saved to the meeting chat. So the presenters and organizers, co-organizers have access to that. It does pop up in the chat there. You can download it there, or you can go to the participant list at the end of the meeting before you leave and download the file there. Understand that this is just one tool to use in evaluating who was at the class. But basically, it just gives a quick spreadsheet of the name, meaning the account they were logged into. And it doesn't verify that it was Charlie. It just that was Charlie's account, or the name that they typed in if they were joining just from the hyperlink and weren't logged into a Red Cross account. It's going to put whatever is there, so that which may not correspond to exactly a name on the official attendance list. So take that with a grain of salt. But it basically just gives a list of the name, when they joined, when they left, which can be helpful for evaluating that, along with who was in the meeting, who you saw, on from there as far as how that all gets evaluated. But that tool is available. That's where you will see it pop up, and it will pop up after the meeting as an attendance report. If you recorded the meeting, it will also have like a recap and a link to the recording, such there. At the end of the class, when you leave, there's actually 2 options for those that are the organizers. You can either leave, which means you leave and the meeting continues. And then if you have the option to end the meeting, what that means is it just ends the meeting for everyone. It basically kicks everyone out of the meeting. The end meeting option can be helpful, especially for a large course, so you don't have the chat box that never dies, weeks after a class, which in some cases might be useful, but it can help curtail some of that. Okay, but that's kind of our overview of Teams, and we just kind of want to point out a couple where you can get some additional resources that kind of dig into more detail about the different options of Teams and where we have our resources there. So we've got our Virtual Disaster Instructor Tech Talk page on OneSource. So I showed you earlier. But just go to OneSource, just type in VDITT, and it should come up in the search there, or it'll have the links to the upcoming sessions and where the links are and all of that, as well as links to the slide decks and recordings once those are available. Within Teams itself, if you click on the three dots at the top under More and you go down to Help, there's some different help pages that will come up within Teams. Teams is essentially just like a glorified web browser, but just have links to different tools and videos, like how do you create a meeting, how do you share content, and we'll just kind of walk through that in more detail. You can also get to that same information if you go to the Microsoft website to their support.microsoft.com page, and then search for Teams. So let me if you go to learn.microsoft.com, they used to have some nice icons that went across here, but because they're really pushing Copilot, that's what they want you to click on. You can just click on the option here to browse all the product documentation, and then you just scroll down here to Microsoft Teams, and then here's all the same resources that you would have saw have you clicked on the help within Teams. So you've got different as far as managing some other guides and things. Oh, sorry, this is the not learn support. Sorry, I'm not typing this right. Forget what I just said. Support.microsoft.com. There we go. Sorry, this is better. So go to support.microsoft.com and then click on Microsoft Teams. And now this will have all of the, Teams has a lot of different things you can do with it, but specifically meetings part, got some tutorials here on stuff that we've gone over, as well as stuff in more detail on some of the additional options and features. So that's all available there. Good to know where that is. There are some edge-based courses related to Microsoft Teams. There's a getting started, sharing PowerPoint slides, and then dealing with recordings. And that's pretty much our presentation. We're at our time here, but I'm certainly going to stay here for a moment. And if anybody has any specific questions they want to ask, do thank you for joining us today on our presentation. So if you got a question, go ahead and raise your hand or pop it into the chat. Well, thank you, everyone. I don't see any questions. So have an awesome day, and we'll see you on a future course.